I'll never forget in my first year in the seminary, Father John O'Reilly, a priest of more than 60 years, telling the seminarians, God didn't give us the commandments to prohibit us, but to protect us. At the end of the day, brothers and sisters, no man wants his possessions taken from him. No woman wants her husband taken from her. No one wants their life taken from them. These words made a lasting impression on me, because if you think about it, it is true. God gave us the commandments not because he was a controlling old ogre who didn't want us to have fun, but so that we could all live ordered, peaceful, happy, and holy lives. Though he commands us not to kill, commit adultery, or steal, what he really wants is to protect and free us from the disorders that lead to such sins and ultimately unhappiness. He wants to protect and free us from selfishness and the compulsive removal of anything, including an unwanted life that interferes with our ability to do what we want when we want. He wants to protect and free us from disordered sexual immorality that strips us of our dignity, a dignity made in the image and likeness of God. He wants to protect and free us from greed for money, power, and possessions, signs of our ungratefulness to God for the specific and unique gifts he's bestowed upon us. If we all followed the commandments, we would all be protected, we would all be happy, we would all be truly free. Sadly, as we know, brothers and sisters, the world sees human freedom in a completely opposite sense. For the world, the commandments are an unjust and imaginary imposition that stop us from being free, supposedly. For the world, freedom means being able to do what we want, when we want, irrespective of the consequences. But is the world truly free? Or has it in reality just become a slave of its own sin and vice? We see in the first line of today's first reading God saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. As he said that to the Israelites all those thousands of years ago, so he repeats these words to the world today. God wants to take the world, including each and every one of us, out of our houses of slavery, our slavery to sin. Even though we may not commit some of those gravest of sins that the world is so proud of, we still sin every day. Our imperfections often lead us down the path of pride and selfishness, which ultimately, unchecked, lead to a whole litany of sins, venial and mortal. For us, during this time of Lent, God's call out of slavery is very timely. For it is during this time that we are called to subdue our bodies, and perhaps more importantly, our minds and hearts, with prayer, fasting, and penance. It is not for nothing, brothers and sisters, but as an important step we need to take to reclaim control of ourselves, to give us the strength to resist all the temptations the world will throw at us. Perhaps the first step to that freedom during Lent is to renew again our commitment to obeying the commandments, and particularly the first 3 of those 10 commandments. For brothers and sisters, the 10 commandments are made up of 2 sets, 3 commandments relating to our relationship with God, and 7 relating to our relationship with ourselves and our neighbours. When our relationship with God is in order, everything else naturally falls into place. In those first 3 commandments, we are called to love God first before all other things, to hold high and holy his name, and to keep one day of the week sacred for prayer, worship of God, and rest. Again, God gave us these first 3 commandments to protect us from making earthly things, including ourselves, false gods, to protect us from a disordered life, to protect us from pride and self-absorption, ultimately to protect us from self-destruction. Having given to God what belongs to God, we are then in a better place to make judgments on how to love our neighbours as ourselves. First thing after loving God is honouring our mother and father. Then we must honour our neighbour's life and good name. Then we must honour their dignity, made in the image and likeness of God. And finally, we must honour what God has chosen to give them personally. The easiest way to get to this point, brothers and sisters, is for us to follow the twofold law that Jesus summed all of the commandments in. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. And then, if we do this most perfectly, that is, by loving God and then loving neighbour as ourselves. We won't need to be told, "Thou shalt not," but instead we'll be told, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into your master's joy."